Well, hello, haven't seen you in a while. The reason for this video is the fact that I keep seeing people say that Fate is a bad adaptation, but a good show outside of being an adaptation. And unfortunately, I think good, it's a little bit too generous. I wouldn't say it's the worst thing in the world, don't get me wrong, but I think it'd be fun to dive into the good and the bad about the show in general. This show is an amalgamation of tired teen TV tropes. They were not that good when they just came out and nothing short of exasperating now after it's been done 1,000 times in like the last 20 years. Doing something that has been done is not necessarily a terrible thing, but the issues that I have with this show lie within its lack of self-awareness when it comes to their platform, genre, number of episodes, and most of all, the story. However, let me be clear, I am not here to shit on the show. Just like any other deep dive that I've done, I just want to analyze a piece of media and try to present my findings and my opinions in the way that would hopefully be interesting to others. This project started like any other Netflix or CW adaptation in the past few years. We have a cartoon that was going to be adapted to a gritty, dark version of it. And I think, unlike a lot of other adaptations, Winx could have been adapted to a young adult show really well. Mostly because the original show, the one that was targeted at 8 to 12-year-olds, not the stuff that's on Netflix right now, season 5 through 8 are on Netflix. These are not the original show. And the original, the first 4 seasons, were written with American teen dramas as an inspiration to the writing structure. You already had a lot of romance, adventure, and a lot of dark themes, surprisingly, like war, terrorism, creepy teachers, forced underground marriages, deaths of main characters, all of that. I thought they had it in the bag because it would be so easy to make a hit show with something that was already inspired by teen shows and a show that was full of early 2000s fashion, which was just about to come back with full force in 2020 because it started to creep back up in around 2018, so it was really easy to predict. And then we got Fate, and most of all, the interviews with the creator and the cast. Some of the official interviews featured information about the original show that Fate was adapting, with weird tidbits like calling the original show a Nickelodeon cartoon, which it sure isn't. A soft reboot was produced by Nickelodeon, sure, but it wasn't originally produced by Nickelodeon. But I thought, you know what? It must be a mistake on the journalist's part or the editor. Then we get Brian talking about the show, and that's when I started to expect that the adaptation might not be an adult version of Winx, and that it might not even going to be unique to compare to other subpar adaptations we've been getting lately. Listen, I'm not the one who's going to criticize the use of drugs and sex scenes in Fate. I wanted an adult version of the show. It's just adult production does not usually equate to sloppy writing or unlikable characters. Regardless of what they changed, I was more shocked by Brian's lack of knowledge of the original show, going so far as insinuating that male fairies don't exist in the Winx world. And that guys are specialists exclusively. Male fairies exist in the Winx world. They appear mostly in Domino, and men with magical abilities obviously have other forms like wizard. Winx is a very heteronormative world, but the schools and magics are just simply not co-ed. And finding male fairies in the Winx world is just as easy as going to Google and typing in male fairies Winx. When it comes to specialists are basically soldiers/heroes, and we get female soldiers and heroes all over the Winx universe, from Andros to Earth. Is it as common as it should be? No, but in this specific case, these schools were not co-ed. So it's just a bit strange that that was the emphasis of the media rollout. Brian and a bunch of other articles called Winx a manga anime, which is not accurate. And yes, it was written this specific way, manga anime, without a comma or anything. So I think that they think that manga and anime is the same thing, and those two are like two different forms of media altogether. So maybe it's just the journalist that wrote it down like that. So I'm not gonna, hold it against him or something like that. I'm gonna choose that Brian knows what he's talking about. The original creator, Eugenio Straffi, said that he was involved or the OG producers were involved in season 1 of Fate, but it seems to be a little bit of a confusing matter since his thoughts on the show seem to not be so favorable now, based on his statement that he released after Fate's cancellation. At least he didn't let Netflix make the male characters take the lead in the stories, as they wanted to do at first. There were some casting issues that I will address later, but in my opinion, Bloom, Sky, and Stella, actors, look a lot like the original characters. It was, however, disheartening to see the cast not know anything about the characters that they're playing as like a respectful professional thing to do, to learn about the intellectual property and its fan base that you're about to profit off of. They seem to genuinely think that the Nickelodeon seasons are the originals, because Precious, the actress that plays Aisha, when she's named the biggest fan out of all of them of the original show,
I would say Precious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She says that she basically knows about the original only because her younger sisters watch the show. And Precious is the age that was the original target demographic back in the day when the series premiered. So since she thinks that its prime was after she was 8 to 11, that means they don't even know about the actual original show that brought all the fans to the fandom. The only one of them who mentions a bit about their character is Danny, the guy who plays Sky.
And I want 2 swords like Riven.
Brought up that he wants a blue sword.
Why?
Okay. If we're gonna get into
And a Pegasus.
if we're gonna get into facts here, I think it's on Wikipedia that they fight with blue lightsabers. They have actual like light swords, I think they're called.
And all of them start nagging him.
Sorry,
and then
maybe
we
we should
have-
take that back about
We are
Precious
gonna
being
get
the number one
schooled.
fan.
Yeah, I think
Oh, I'm
Danny's
not.
the number
I'm
one
not.
fan.
I've just got
Because he
friends
just
who are big
recited
fans.
the Wikipedia page. Danny, you
Yeah,
are the number one fan.
We've all recited Wikipedia page.
Some of it's a
you
mutt.
sit and you do your
Yeah.
research.
You.
Kind of joking, oh, he's the biggest fan, not Precious. He honestly just mentioned a basic fact about Sky and responded to them with, well, it's on the character's wiki page, and we've all read the wiki pages. But clearly they did not. They're making fun of him for doing his job. Like, I know it's lighthearted, just poking fun or whatever, but it does show that they didn't do even the bare minimum. It's just a respectful thing to do when you enter a world of a pre-existing intellectual property. Yeah, this world is reimagined, the one that they're operating in, but it is going to profit off of something that is even bigger than itself. It's weird not to at least be curious, because aren't you excited to get a big role so early on in your career? I know that for some people 20s is not early on in their career, but I know a lot of actors, and to land a role like that at an age like that, at like 22 or something, is pretty major. Don't you want to have a bit of a fuller understanding of what you are bringing to the table to have more informative conversations with the people who interview you? When the journalist asks you what is better or worse, what is being changed from the original, just imagine Hayden Christensen. He actually got so much hate for no fucking reason, but imagine Hayden Christensen giving an interview with a bunch of other prequel Star Wars actors, and when he's asked what his favorite movie out of the original trilogy is, or what is the biggest difference between his portrayal of Anakin and the portrayal of Anakin as Darth Vader in later movies or previous movies, you know what I mean, he would just say, who's Darth Vader? That's the level of not giving a fuck we're talking about here, okay? Yeah, for Fate, these characters are not narratively connected, but in the case of Hayden, he also doesn't need to know how to act as Darth Vader in his suit and everything in order for him to do his job, but it is expected of him that he would do his bare minimum of research to know who the fuck that even is. It's just a professional and courteous thing to do. You just have to have enough of respect for the audience to not treat the original show like an embarrassing secret. To be acting like this, you would think that Fate was actually written well enough to be entertaining for adults and was higher quality than the original. When I made restyling videos of shows, just styling Ever After High, even though I wasn't versed in it, I watched the show and read the characters' fan wikis about their backgrounds. In this case, even if I get things wrong, which happens, I at least actually tried and was respectful to the original. There's also 2 books that got released after the release of Fate Season 1. The books promised an expansion of the existing world and fleshing out of the side characters, but inside, it was almost identical to the show. From what I've read, it's almost word for word, almost nothing added in terms of the inner world of the characters. So, if you're looking to get more info and you're interested in reading more about Fate, I think the prequel, Lighting the Fire, would suit your taste better because it is the only one out of the 2 books that offers anything new, and to be honest, it's still not that much. Today we will dive into art direction, writing, and world building of the series. The design part is omitted. I usually have it in these deep dives, but I have made 2 videos on Fate's fashion and design, so I'm just going to link them in the description if you want to watch that specifically. So let's start with I have talked about how this show could have been an extraordinary piece of media if it only took risks. In terms of it being an adaptation, in previous fashion videos, I talked about, like the mood and setting that I think would work better. I'm going to link them somewhere if you want to specifically watch something regarding the fashion. But today I want to focus on the vision that the show actually chose for itself, outside of it being an adaptation. If we just analyze the world that Fate presents to us, it comes off more like a British magic school in the middle of lush vegetation rather than an intergalactic fairy school that exists in a multi-realm space. We'll get more in depth on this when we get into the world building when it comes to actual magic. But aesthetically, this school is basically Hogwarts. Based on the lore, like the term changeling or otherworld, and the fact that the show is being filmed in Ireland, it is evident that the inspiration for this magical world is Gaelic Ireland and its mythology. This aesthetic can be worked into their current world or a new other world that they're creating, but the show falls short in terms of utilizing and committing to the aesthetic that they have chosen. I like Celtic imagery, but it's not implemented in any of the fashion, traditions, and the like in the other world. The aesthetic in the show is too much like the Secret Circle, Shadowhunters, Legacies, The Order, The Vampire Diaries, literally any kind of lazy magic or fantasy show on the CW or any other network for this matter, because we're talking about Netflix today.
What
the look of the show is only slightly different from some of these shows, and it is only because the show is literally, physically filmed in Ireland instead of Atlanta or some shit. Now, visually speaking, the school does look fitting to their Celtic mythology, inspired fairies vision, but the lighting, camera work, angles are too similar to the typical subpar YA series. The biggest issue I have with the visual setup of this show is the sheer amount of empty rooms or empty shots that are filled with green and red lighting. That happens quite a bit. The gel lights are used to add atmosphere to compensate for the fact that some characters are literally hanging out in what looks like a storage room. It is not a great idea to rely on lighting that heavily, even though some people might find it okay. Most people, even those who don't know what exactly is making them feel that way about a scene, would be taken out of the experience. We get some cute shots here and there, but the majority of the visuals are carried by the nature around, which is, yeah, it's beautiful, but not a deviation enough from what you can see in any small town in the northern hemisphere. I do want to note that for some shots, even though they are filled with a crazy amount of red and green lighting, you still get a good set that feels lived in and appropriate for the setting and art direction of the series. For example, the Winx suite is definitely cozy and features a really cute layout with a ton of clutter objects. Making the space feel like a suite occupied by 5 to 6 girls, I also really like the greenhouse. The greenhouse scenes always felt pretty good because of the surrounding vegetation, and yes, it is still vegetation, but because it also has this vibe of being a lab, it's a little bit more of a unique experience than just looking at a bunch of trees covered in moss, Another great location was the banquet hall in season 2. I think that was one of the first times in the show where I was genuinely pleasantly surprised by what the location scouts could find. I don't know if it's even in the same building or not, or maybe they just kind of shot in a different way. Whatever it is, it does feel like it's part of Althea regardless. And I loved the lighting in the shot, and I really liked the butterflies flying around. It definitely felt like it was worthwhile looking at it, you know? So you get two worlds. One of them is barely shown, Earth, which is totally cool with me. I'm not here to see damn California or something. And the other one is the parallel planet, plane of existence of the other world. But since the other world is not transformed to look any different in terms of feeling like a different universe or a different planet or even having a different culture, it becomes the biggest reason why little quirks like Valtor, the villain of season 2, liking Earth kitsch doesn't really work in the show. Because you don't live in a magical world when you are in other world. It's just Anglophone Europe, babe. I don't know what to tell you. It looks like it talks like it smells like it. References to Harry Potter, of all things. Even assigning houses.
Are you the one person in the universe who's never read Harry Potter? Ravenclaw?
Sometimes Slytherin.
Using Instagram, none of it makes sense. Why would they use Instagram? And how do they make sure that magic doesn't slip into the background of their stories or something? Magical technology was entirely removed, that's what was told to us, that it was entirely removed from the series, just like Techno has been, because it doesn't fit the aesthetic of this show. However, why are they still referencing and using Instagram? An app that so heavily disrupts the feeling of being in a different world. If they would have created a different app, it would clash too. Mostly because they removed Techno Magic. Techno Magic would genuinely explain a lot of this stuff away. Not to rely on comparing it to the original that heavily, but technology in the original had social media function, with Sky's engagement being talked about on the World Wide Web. However, it never felt like it was an Earth channel talking about it. I think partially because of how heavily monarchies ruled the realms of the show. And monarchies kind of had this distinct aesthetics and customs too. Here, artistically speaking, even magic monarchy feels underwhelming just because of how drab, modern, and Earth-like everything is. Queen Luna looks like a first lady or part of the English monarchy, which is not a compliment. Even here on Earth, we had so many traditional and royal garments that would be perfect to pull from. Instead, we get this ratty pink number, and oh my god, the vapes.
Stupid tree.
Vapes are an aesthetic nightmare, to be honest. They look so bad. In a magical world, I don't even care if you have magic. As long as they don't look like dorks with their damn vapes. I swear to god, I can tell if the production was spearheaded by an American, if they avoid showing regular cigarettes in modern setting, but show vapes and weed instead, as if vapes are not literally horrible for your lungs, and smoking is still smoking, babe. I don't know what to tell you. If you vape, I'm sorry, I guess. But I think you know better than anybody how lame vapes are visually speaking. The technology they showed in terms of holograms was really surprising to me because they purposefully eradicated technology that was quite big in the original, and now they clumsily added here and there, like with Queen Luna's address after Bloom killed Rosalind. Like it was kind of a nod to the Hunger Games in terms of aesthetics. As we've learned with the Virgin series, you guys need to be more creative. Otherwise, you will always fail to make a good, artistically sound project. It's making it feel like a damn dystopia with that color scheme and tone of the hologram. It's just not it. However, let me praise the show on some things. Example, I heard a lot of complaints about the visual effects in the show. And to be honest, I don't see what the problem is. For example, Bloom using her powers in season 1, episode 1, looks good. Same with Aisha putting the fire out. I like the way that they choreographed the scene. The performance of Abigail was good too. The way Bloom was happy to conjure up fire and then scared because she couldn't stop it was well done. With Bloom shaking parts of her flame down on the ground and setting everything on fire. It brings in the coolest part of the scene where Aisha is putting out the fire with water. What I liked about it is not that she's putting out fire with water, but the fact that they decided to have her pull water from under the ground to create a little wave. That was an interesting visual choice, and I think that it worked pretty well. It made her look quite powerful, and it was a more interesting way to go about it than have her release water from her hands or something like that, you know. I liked what the map looked like in the war room. I think that the actress playing Beatrix, Sadie Fevral, was always doing a great job with her magic choreography. I don't know if it was her choices, but I think that it worked nonetheless. Even when they were a little bit dramatic, for some reason it still worked, which is honestly rare in general in live action magic sequences. I do have an issue with editing though, and that problem is most evident with the transformation sequences in both seasons. For example, when Bloom is transforming, the impact of special effects is kind of undermined because of the speed of footage, and to be honest, the choreography is lacking. First and foremost, special effects, they're expensive as hell. It costs a damn arm and a leg to get anything done in VFX. And it pains me to see the impact of them get kind of undermined by the execution of either production or editing. I think the beginning of the song was good, but then it turned into this house song, and it kind of lost its charm in the context of the show, since the show is so far away from trying to use the modern or futuristic aesthetics in it. Felt super out of place, to be honest. We do get a beautiful vortex that was made by Aisha. The effects look kind of pretty, I think, but what I have a problem with is the shape of the wings and the choreography, and that, you know, speeding up, slowing down didn't really work that well. When I talk about choreographies in shows, movies, animation, I'm not talking about some dance performed by the actress. I am specifically talking about the technical blocking and shot planning in combination with actors' movements and premeditated plan for editing and post, alright? So in the case of Fate transformations, we get a few really odd choices. Some of them, of course, are awkward movements from the actresses, but that's to be expected because they don't really have that much time and that much of a budget to really get it done well. However, of course, it would be better if it was done well. But the second one is specifically that I want to focus on is the editing of the shots. There's a lot of speed manipulation going on with the footage. It slows down, it speeds up, and it would make a lot more sense for it to do such things if there was, for example, a change of an outfit and a pan of the camera to the hand, for example, when a glove appears on it or something like that, you know? It makes absolutely no sense to have this speeding up and down. It doesn't really work that well. It can be done well, but it hasn't been done well in this case, so it's a little bit of a shame that they decided to go with this type of editing because it undermines all the other work that's been done for this shot. All the snappy, choppy kind of intercuts or speed manipulations are again way too futuristic for this, and in combination with the song, it just clashes so badly.
But are you stronger than all of us?
And it's hard to take it seriously, you know? As soon as the vortex started going around Bloom and the flames appeared, it looked kind of cool, you know? It didn't feel lame. But then as soon as that editing started with the speeding up and speeding down, it just really ruined it. I don't know why they went with that, because it was really not a great choice. Of course, transformations are hard to make. It's hard to make them work, let alone in a show that aggressively pivoted away from all of the aesthetic choices that would have had to be made to accommodate this at the very beginning of the project. This type of twirling, this type of wings just doesn't look great with ugly clothes or with casual clothes for that matter. You would have to at least have something flowy or use textures and materials in the costuming to make it look less awkward. Because if you're just gonna give them wings and they're wearing jeans, skinny jeans at that, it's just not gonna look cute. It's just not. The size of the wings is also inconsistent, but I am so glad that they fixed the angle of the wings that they were pointing at, because in season 1, Bloom's wings were so droopy. They looked sad. I've heard a lot of people saying that they don't like Stella's wings. I personally like them. I don't like Tara's wings because they kind of look too much like glass, but like choppy. It's as if they created a bunch of glass shards and then arranged them into something wing-like The most obvious choice for Tara would be maybe Petals. I don't know, but it's definitely not a great choice to go with this broken glass looking thing. I don't know. It looks like glass shards. Basically, for the most part, special effects look fine to me. There are moments that I don't love. Like, I'm not a fan of the way that Flora's power channeling looked like, because she got this massive green gel light pointed at her face during the production. It just doesn't quite make sense as to why it would be there. Like, Bloom needs some flames reflected on her face. Stella needs some light dancing on hers. But this, even if they wanted to go with like a magical glow, this is too far. It kind of undermines the VFX again, because it's just so bright, too bright. It's a bit strange because they're trying to go for a very realistic look. Realistic, you know what I mean? Very grounded look, but then they do things like this that don't quite make any sense. Turn down that gel light, please. But of course, there are more moments in terms of VFX that I did like. There was one moment, Stella using her light magic or channeling her light magic when they were trying to return Yusa's magic back to her. A lot of people were complaining that they didn't like how warped the room looked because of Stella's power, and I personally like that because I think that it is super interesting approach to light magic. I also think that it makes a lot of sense that light magic would be causing differences in perception in what you can see, and I think it's somewhat of a nod back to season 1 when we learned the extent of what light magic could do with Queen Luna threatening Stella to do better, where she kind of warped the reality around her and made her see a bunch of things that didn't actually exist. I think that that was the moment when I was like, oh, they're actually doing something interesting with this system, because I'm not a fan of very simple elemental systems in terms of magic. And that was a moment when I was like, this is actually cool. And I think that they are going in the right direction by expanding what light could be. And I think that it kind of puts light magic a lot higher up in terms of how powerful a specific element is, because it's not just emitting light. By the way, if Darcy was in this world, she would be a light fairy. I liked what Bloom's dragon flame looked like in the show, especially in season 2. The flame got a lot more depth. It had a little bit more pink going on inside to give it a bit of more of an interesting look rather than just having a bunch of orange, brown, and red, because I think that it just gives it a bit of like that magical twang if you add a bit of pink or a bit of like cool tone color into the mix to really make it look slightly more magical rather than just fire. There's also definitely a difference between Stella's magic in first and second season. In the first season, the light that would be actually shining on her from her magic when she was taking a selfie or when she was helping Bloom at the end with Rosalind, the light was a little bit too cool tone. I actually wrote down what it reminded me of. In season 1, her magic looked like office fluorescent lights beaming at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday in an office kitchen while someone cuts a cake on November 16th because it's Janice's birthday. You understand what I mean? I know it's a little bit too specific of a metaphor, but you get the point. Like, the colors of the actual ball of light were cool, but the tone on her face that it actually cast on her, that was just not great. So I'm really happy that they switched it up a little bit, it seems like, or it's just not as sickly looking now. I wouldn't say that it's a warm tone now or anything like that, but it's definitely a little bit more flattering than it was in season 1. I also want to mention a couple more scenes that utilized VFX and magic in the show really well. First of all, Rosalind versus Bloom scene was great. I loved the way that she literally froze Bloom. Frost covering her mouth entirely. It felt a little bit claustrophobic because of this feeling of understanding that girlie can't breathe. I loved her melting it off. Very Bloom season 1 of her, if I do say so myself.
What the?
Interesting choice of a finger, Rosalind. And I loved that Rosalind got roasted to the bone, that rat murderer. Another scene that was really entertaining to watch, Soul Breakout scene. It was very subtle uses of magic, but I thought they worked pretty well and were quite entertaining. Since we're talking about action scenes, I have to talk about fight scenes. We get kind of a mixed bag here. One of the worst moments for action scenes is the fight of specialists that was at the end of season 2. We get this moment. First of all, this shot and the amount of people present just doesn't work for like a clash or two forces colliding kind of shot. They should have started the fight in a different way, starting maybe with 2 people and then it kind of turned into a domino effect from there. Or a surrounding Althea, kind of a siege of Althea sequence. They are dealing with a limited amount of people. They're dealing with a limited amount of space. This is not a massive war, and they should have not presented it as such because it is a little bit too difficult to pull off, and it's better to make it into kind of like covert operation because it would be easier for them to pull it off, and it would be just as effective as this good scene with Sky where he kind of pulls this whole hiding close to the ceiling situation. I think that scene was very much a specialist scene in terms of reminding me of how like cool specialists seemed to me when I was a kid, when I was watching the original show, you know, doing all those tricks and shit. Finally, it was something cool rather than, you know, wood swords and whatever. This clip is just especially funny because the actors start running and then they suddenly lose their speed. They kind of stop for a moment because it's not a real fight. So they gotta get in position for the choreography of the actual fight that they actually know how to do. So it becomes such an awkward moment. It literally made me laugh while I was watching it. Some specialist fights are actually quite good. You can see that the actors put a lot of work into it to make it look like it's a real fight. But there are moments where there's just like this random twirling added in, especially in practice fights that they have. I just think that twirling where it's not needed, they would actually lead to like the person getting taken out of the fight because it exposed them so much. I get that some flair is like necessary to make an action scene work and a fight scene work, and I love me some flair, but I caught so many moments in the choreo that should have been cut. Fairies are not exempt from wonky action sequences. They actually lead in that department, which is interesting since they don't actually do that much in terms of action scenes. That Valtor standoff, Sebastian standoff, oh, it was so underwhelming. It's as underwhelming as it gets, and it's specifically funny again and kind of awkward, mostly because of the blocking in the scene. That scene just, what the hell was going on the entire time? The production team just decided to put Valtor right in the middle and have the girls standing at each kind of point, the four of them, right? And that would have been fine, I guess, if there was some kind of fight going on before then, but it's just so strange, and it did not feel like a power struggle. It was just lame, to be honest, it was. I was glad to see them use magic in combat though. That Sky scene actually made me remember again that specialists used to have levitating motorcycles, phantom blades, you know, the cool shit. I also like the books that the prop department made. They looked really good. When it comes to music, we get some choices that are okay and some that don't really work. But what I was more interested in was the original score for the show. Finding Fate's original score was a challenge. I don't think that they have released it anywhere officially. Not a lot of fans posted it anywhere or anything like that. I have unearthed this interview with the score creator and Nikitin. There's one theme. It's really hard to even find the original score in the show. It's usually quiet and the themes are not very distinct. One theme that you can memorize or remember from the show is probably the one at the end, at the credits, when I watched the interview and talked about what Brian wanted, and Brian wanted it to sound kind of mystical, but he didn't want any twinkling sounds or anything like that.
So Brian was adamant that he did want to feel that there's this magical fairy world, but it could not be twinkly and, you know, too soft.
And
sparkly, none of that. I put a bit of sparkle in the first bits, and he said, no, that's not what we're after.
Which is interesting because they ended up with this. This melody and this production, at first when I heard it in the show, I was like, this sounds oddly familiar. I don't know why, but I feel like I've heard it before. And it kept on bugging me. That's why I dug into it at the end of Art Direction research. And I found Fate end credits, Shadowhunters end credits, and the Vampire Diaries end credits technically sound the same. At the very least, they have the same production. At worst, they are literally a ripoff with, I feel like Shadowhunters, the ending is just like way too similar of a melody to the Vampire Diaries. It literally sounds like this, starting with Fate, Shadowhunters, And now the Vampire Diaries. You see where I'm going with this? I'm not gonna be playing more than 7 seconds. You can go and look it up yourself to compare, but they definitely do sound very similar. Anyway, very generic visuals with some highlights and some lowlights, evening out to a very mid-art direction that does not really stand out in any interesting way from the other teen shows. Ignore the hair if the hair is bothering you, okay? I cannot figure it out today. It's just not working. Anyway, the sheer amount of notes I had for the writing section to expand on and to write the script about is honestly insane. I want to start by addressing one of the dominant descriptors of this show that was used both by the creators and the fans, and that is dark, mature, adult. Many fans, when reacting to this show, have said that they didn't like that this show is so dark and edgy, oftentimes saying they did not want a gritty adaptation of the show. Now, I would like to argue with both parties. When I heard both call Fate a more mature and adult show, I wanted to cackle. I 100% think that this show is not adult enough. When I heard that the show was going to target the OG fans who have grown up now and are in their 20s or really late teens, for people who watched Nickelodeon version of the show, which is not the OG, but whatever, as well as anyone else who's a young adult that would be drawn into this universe, I expected adult themes. And yeah, there are a lot of dumbass adults out there, but when I watch a show, I want to find a lot of characters to be driven by the motivations that make sense for them. I want to see depth in them and in the interpersonal connections. Obviously, there are moments that work, some moments that make a tired trope feel fitting in comparison to the rest of the narrative mise-en-scene. This show is extremely juvenile and full of shallow people with shallow relationships. I know that there is sex, drugs, guts, and gore going on in there, but the series isn't actually complex. Just adding dick jokes and some weed does not make for a mature or even entertaining story. Unfortunately, some of the aspects of the show, like inappropriate levity and tonal shifts, we'll talk about it later, are actually reminiscent of the later seasons of the animated show, when the series started to be written by mostly Nickelodeon writers after Eugenio decided that Winx is going to target a younger demographic than the original 4 seasons. Mind you, the original was already targeting kids from 8 to 12 years old. It does not bode well when an adult series has an emotional diapason of a show written for preschoolers by Blue's Clues writers. I do want to say that I am going to defend some of the writing choices that you might not gonna expect, but I watched the show a few times as I do for my deep dives, and I've done so with an open mind, specifically because I wanted to talk about what this show actually is on its own, outside of the original shadow. I made a neat little list of fateful writing choices in the show that impacted the quality dramatically in both negative and positive ways. Number 1, Bloom is comically stupid, and based on the judgments about people who do the same things she does, she's also incredibly unlikable. Too unlikable. Listen, I am not against morally gray characters. Actually, I think that it's a sign of a well-written story when we have a cast of characters that act in more complex ways than in stories with the old good versus evil kind of structure. However, the only thing that makes you like Bloom in any capacity, in random scenes, is Abigail's charisma. The actress is doing all the heavy lifting, and the character still doesn't cross into the likable category, even with all that fucking effort. There are some things that I like about her relationship with other characters, but upon close inspection of her, I was surprised by how many things rubbed me the wrong way about her. The way that she found out about her powers is through her getting mad at her parents, who took her door off the hinges, and she burned the whole house down, injuring her mother. This can of course be framed as an accident, as I think we were supposed to perceive it as. But the way that the creator decided to shoot this scene makes Bloom look like not a good person. She literally stared at the flame appearing on the floor and creating a path to her parents' bedroom. Okay, well, she was not in control of it, right? Even though the angles and setup kind of undermine that. But also when you listen to her describe it, she literally says, "I don't know how long I let it burn for." Babe, what? Let it? Was she in control or not? The visuals until she starts running to the bedroom and her own words tell us that she was in control. Why would the writers write it this way? It makes her look like she kinda did it purposefully, regardless of whether she did or not. This part is more of an accident, I think, so I kinda moved on from that, not going to hold it against her character. Then she started to consistently act like a dick to Aisha, while simultaneously expecting her to consistently assist her and clean up her messes. These two are not even good enough of friends to expect anything from each other, but Bloom consistently uses Aisha and is so single-minded about her life that she doesn't even think of Aisha as a human being with a life. I don't know what she thinks, but her actions suggest that. The show fails to understand that to see someone as friends, or to see Dowling as a mentor, or to see Alfea as the school that we all would want to go to, we need the dynamics to be established first, before you throw a wrench at them. Show me Bloom and Aisha bonding over something that is not about Bloom for a couple of episodes. Or one episode even. It's important to make the audience like them outside of what they do for Bloom. You need to establish the normal, right? The baseline, before you wreck it with the obstacles that come their way. To show what the characters actually fight for, what they want to go back to, what they even enjoyed about each other or about this school. The whole situation with Rosalind is just nuts. Regardless of whether Bloom believed Rosalind or Farah, there is literally no rush to free Rosalind. Someone who, regardless of them being blood witches, murdered a whole village of people, okay? And tricked her closest allies to participate in it without actually knowing what they're doing. Even if she didn't believe Dowling, by she I mean Bloom, releasing someone who was in cahoots with the people who Bloom thinks killed her family is not smart. Especially just for some information. But the most frustrating part about Rosalind's release is the fact that Bloom can actually communicate with her before she frees her. And she doesn't even try to get the information out of her before releasing her. Like a goddamn idiot. They are literally talking telepathically already. Rosalind is guiding Bloom to release her. And Bloom doesn't even try to figure out whether what she's doing is a good idea or not. Girly girl, just try. Why don't you try? She's also weirdly excited about the process. Like she literally smirks while she's doing it. She's so elated that she can take a barrier down, I guess. It's weird as hell. You don't know this woman. Why are you so excited to see her? Why isn't she at least conflicted about what's going on? Why isn't she a little bit unsure about what she's doing? Farah didn't know that the people in that village were blood witches, and she was super close to Rosalind, so why do you think that she's just gonna give you the information if she's freed? Like, I just don't get it. Bloom saw Farah very surprised by the information, so she knows for sure that Farah wasn't informed. Why would you trust somebody who was lying to the closest people on her team? Right after that, Rosalind tells her that she cannot help them with the burned ones. Again, bad sign that should have made Bloom furious, and understand that she made a massive mistake with Rosalind. After she found out about Rosalind messing up the energy reserves and taking down the barrier, she still thinks that Rosalind had a reason to do so, a reasonable reason to do so. They still could have gone out there and taken care of the burned ones. Why the hell did she have to mess up the border? Because she's a bitch. That's why.
911, mean girl alert.
Bloom, get a clue. It's also really weird how cool they are with the massacre of the blood witches at Asterdale. They are so okay with it. They are literally relieved when they find out. Farah and Sol and all of them. That I don't think I like the side that we're supposed to be rooting for, okay? Farah's death is also on Bloom's hands, by the way. Why'd you have to release that bitch? Why? Just why? Why so hasty with it too? It's just so crazy, I don't get it. The first season shows Bloom to be, you know, a selfish asshole the entire way through. And honestly, just a few changes to the main story could have done wonders to make her seem a lot more likable. If she would have been tricked into releasing Rosalind, if Rosalind communicated something important to her while she was still in stasis talking to her telepathically, if she manipulated her mind or something like that, if she was more concerned about her friends, if she was more explicitly not in control of the flame at her house, like she was asleep, or the flame started in their bedroom so she didn't know that she was even capable of doing all that. She was just angrily thinking about them and not thinking that something was gonna actually happen. While the first season makes her look selfish and stupid, the second season adds extreme arrogance to the mix. I can make a whole compilation of her being arrogant as hell. And I did.
I'll be faster and I'll be stronger.
Well, I was the only one powerful enough to stop him.
Because none of you have this. And I'm the only one who has it.
And if they do, they're not me.
I need to show off.
If anyone should have that power, it should be you.
I know.
Dowling taught us all how to transform. And have you?
Her ego is so massive. It takes only one grand gesture and another speech with Rosalind calling her a star pupil for her to forgive her or change her opinion on her, while she still tells Stella not to be friends with Beatrix. Beatrix has done the same amount of things as Bloom has to get to the same point, to release Rosalind. Technically, if she forgives Rosalind, Beatrix should be kind of default forgiveness, because Beatrix was aiming to release Rosalind too. It's just Bloom is so annoying. She does not see Beatrix as the same as herself. She sees her as a villain, while she thinks that she did a good thing by releasing Rosalind. It just makes no sense. Like, you had a common goal. You can't just pick and choose like that. It makes no sense. And one of them is old General, the head of Althea, and the other one is an orphan. Like, get a grip. Mind you, she was treating Beatrix like that before she let Sebastian into Althea, so she was genuinely not in a position to judge her. She also promises the Blood Witch book to Sebastian, and he says, oh, it has all the answers, haha. And somehow, him having the book is supposed to mean that they don't have access to what's in it anymore, and it's like, why didn't you take pictures and make a PDF? What is going on? Sure, the language is hard to read, but you have a book with a translation that you got from Sky's house, so what is the problem? The show just really doesn't like logic as a concept. We get more nonsense when after Bloom kills Rosalind, she goes to the abandoned house so she wouldn't hurt anyone like she did her mom, and it makes no sense because she's wearing those contraptions that stop you from using magic. Sure, maybe the dragon flame is too powerful, but let's assume that. She still had to want to fight and hurt Rosalind to get that much power out of her, to use her power to the fullest extent of it. So why would she even say that? Yeah, she killed Rosalind, but Rosalind attacked her, so it's not the same. What if we get in a fight and I hurt you, Sky? I'm sorry, but did Sky freeze your entire body and put ice in your throat and nose so you can't breathe during that fight? Because in that case, it's not a bad idea to fry him. Just none of this makes sense. At the very end, after Beatrix is dead, Bloom finally realizes that Beatrix was just like her, wanted to find out about her family, Asterdale. However, unlike Bloom, she did not have loving parents to go back to, because Andrea's dead, and all of the Winx girls were kind of dicks to her right after the death of her literal father. She has no home to go to after graduating, or even in the summer, or whenever. Rosalind is extremely mean to her, and will throw her out on the streets when she sees fit. Why did they need Beatrix to die for them to realize that? Like, come on. Also, when Stella pushes Beatrix through the barrier to unlock it, I guess, she gets like immobilized or whatever. At that point, Bloom thinks that Rosalind is the good guy, so she thinks that Beatrix is trying to free her, and they still push her through the barrier. Like, they see her as an ally at this specific point, and they still do this to her. This is just so gross. It makes the entirety of the Winx suite, all of the 5 girls or whatever, look like self-absorbed dicks. At the very end, Bloom cared so little about her actual parents, who are back in Gardenia, that she didn't even leave them a letter before going into the Dark Realm forever. What a grateful, loving daughter, am I right? And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there are still people who like Bloom, just because Abigail is really likable, and if you are focusing on the actress and not what the character is actually doing and her motivations, you might miss it entirely. Number 2, Sky and Bloom and their relationship with Stella on the side. Bloom and Sky are the most prominent couple in the series, and their arc after the Stella portion from season 1 is pretty good. I think it's really strange that the writers decided to go with the love triangle situation to establish dynamics between the characters, because this is a trope that does not work well for teens and young adults nowadays in media where they expect friendship to be at the forefront. Based on the feedback I've seen from people online, a lot of people are tired of this type of trope being implemented in shows, and including Fate. There are a few things that I liked about Stella and Sky's relationship, specifically the fact that they have this connection to each other and Stella trusts him with her secrets, including but not limited to the secret about her mother being an abusive parent. I also like that the writers did not forget about this relationship after Sky got together with Bloom, and show that they're still good friends in season 2 when Sky realizes that Stella's uncle mentioned something about a gem in her back, and Sky comes to talk to her afterwards and finds out about that gem that made her bleed and be unable to use her magic or leave Althea. Sky is someone that she trusted with showing the cruelty of her mother before she told any other of her friends. However, the way that they were showing the difference between Bloom and Stella's treatment of Sky is quite shallow and oftentimes kind of undermined the established dynamics. One of the manifestations of this was the way Bloom and Stella approached Sky's feelings regarding Soul being bitten or hurt by the burned one, and the time after when he's still infected and they're still looking for the burned one to kill to save Soul's life. Stella is framed to be insensitive about it, but she was more action driven, finding out who was on the assignment to make sure that it was someone skilled, to reassure Sky about the fact that this burned one is going to get tracked down and killed. It is so strange because in the show we see her genuinely talking to people, finding out about who it is, trying to find out the odds of Soul surviving to pass that information on to Sky, while at the same time they show scenes where she's supposedly dismissive and unsupportive. The part that actually really annoyed me in this whole situation is when they're getting ready for the party and the party itself, where Stella is presented as somewhat heartless by asking Sky to drink and go party while he's, dealing with this thing with Soul. She does come off as being insensitive to Sky, but the show is very inconsistent about what they deem insensitive, because when Bloom does the same exact thing just like a scene later, asks Sky to go play beer pong after they have a short conversation about Soul and about parents in general. They literally go to get drunk to play beer pong. Sky has a completely different reaction, and he's not the only one. Riven also thinks that Stella is insensitive and I guess somewhat egotistic when she tells Sky that he should go party, but when it's Bloom, he calls her the fun one for partying and getting drunk with Sky later. If it would have been just a Sky thing, I would say that Sky is just a shallow guy who does not really see actions, but rather decides on which action is morally good or bad, acceptable or unacceptable, based on his attraction to the person he's interacting with. Stella, she's old news. She's not someone he's crashing on anymore. So Stella plus saying thing A equals bad. Bloom plus saying thing A equals good. It's clear what's different about these variables. He's not the only one who somehow sees Bloom as nice, considerate, selfless person for absolutely no reason at all. Because up until this point, unlike a lot of other stories, our main heroine was nothing but rude and inconsiderate to everyone around her, going as far as being a dick to Aisha, a person who's been helping her a lot since the very beginning. Sky makes questionable decisions here and there too. Of course, maybe it can be explained away by his age, but it seems to be a little bit reductive because he is a character that's considered to be old enough to participate in their wars. First thing that he does that's a little bit strange is get pissed at Soul for, I guess, not letting him go and track down the burned one on his own, which is a little crazy. At least it's more understandable in this case, in terms of Sky being frustrated with the situation, but still a little bit mean to Soul because Soul is suffering and he's clearly not doing well physically and mentally, and Sky is kind of making a scene, Even if he decided to go and take down the burned one on his own, I think it would have been a good idea for him to kind of act a little bit more supportive anyway of just the person who he loves who's suffering right now, instead of being all pissy. But the second thing that's actually kind of strange is Sky being mad at Soul for, I guess, killing Andres, which he didn't do. Andres is alive, but Soul did think that he killed him. I think that it makes sense to be a little bit upset about the whole situation, but knowing that he didn't have a choice and he was trying to stop a goddamn It should make sense to Sky why he did that. It's especially strange when Sky feels this strongly about being mad at Sol when he meets Andreas and realizes that he's kind of a dick. Like, he can be a little bit mad at Sol, but being mad enough to let him be sent to Polaris or telling him to never come back and see him again, it's just so over the top. I don't know. If Andreas was at the very least a nice person, in terms of what Sky has observed, it would make a little bit more sense. But here it just seems like these motivations are not quite worked out, and his actions correlate more with stirring up drama rather than showing a teen struggling with his father figures. Of course, not the entirety of this father-son dynamics are botched. There are good moments too, but there's just a lot of inconsistencies, in my opinion. Bloom and Sky as a couple do seem to bond quite a bit, especially in season 2. They seem like people who are actually interested in each other. They have a cute dynamic. I think that the actors liking each other really helps their case overall. Number 3, the Aisha problem. I have said that I'm not going to use the original show as a way to bring down Fate in terms of being an unfaithful adaptation, but there's just a lot that I don't like in terms of what they changed about Aisha from the original to this adaptation. First and foremost, they stripped her of the princess title. I have no idea as to why. Since Fate decided to keep the monarchy structure for the realms, they also made her the mom of the group, especially Bloom's mom, simultaneously becoming so many stereotypical tropes of black female characters in one. She is the caretaker. She is white girl's best friend whose only objective is to solve Bloom's problems. She doesn't even get her goddamn royal title. And her origin story of how she ran into her first power outburst is a story about public toilets overflowing with shit. Like, really? The issues were somewhat remedied in season 2 with an introduction of Aisha's own story arc and character development with Grey in relation to Grey. But this character development leads us to a bunch of other issues that we need to address. Aisha's storyline in season 2 is very closely related to Flora, the new addition to the cast. And Flora? Oh boy. Number 4, the Flora problem. As most of the public interested in shows like Fate know, Fate had an issue with a lot of whitewashing of the original characters. A weird issue to have in this day and age, especially considering that the original came out in 2004 and was more inclusive than the 2022 adaptation, except for sexualities, I guess. Flora was one of the characters that was originally whitewashed. It's a bit of a difficult thing to explain, but basically, when some casting info leaked, there was a leak that confirmed that Elliot was originally cast to be Flora and then changed to Tara to kind of avoid the backlash, because they already had an issue with the fact that actress from Musa was not Asian and Musa is supposed to be Asian. Then after the release of season 1, it was quickly confirmed that Flora is going to be introduced in season 2 and that she's going to be played by a Latina woman like Flora is. Honestly, the actress is gorgeous. She's a good fit for Flora in general. A good choice overall. But if you've seen my deep dive into the original show, the first 4 seasons, I have talked about the introduction of a new character in season 2 or later seasons after season 1. A character that's supposed to be in the main cast. In the case of the original, it was Aisha. In this case, it's Flora. I was really surprised how well the integration of Aisha was in the original cartoon, because it is a kids show, so you kind of expect less of a smooth integration of any of the new characters. Now, Flora in Fate is an interesting case of a character being a clear representation of how Brian and other writers for Fate go about creating their story. We were told that Flora's introduction was always their plan from the get-go, which is not very believable. First and foremost, we literally know how Brian writes his shows. He has shown it through his previous work, and he quite literally told us in an interview, and I quote, "I always go into things believing that having a rough idea of where you want to go is great, but then let the story organically form as you realize what characters are working and what characters are not working." There are a few moments where Brian says that they kind of go with the flow and write things without a big story in mind, big overarching story over multiple seasons, with a lot of references to the way it was done on set of The Vampire Diaries. Aside from that, Flora is useless, directionless character that would have had a life of her own, motivations of her own, if she was a character that was planned from the very beginning, especially to be introduced in a later season. This is the biggest issue with the character. She does not have any motivations. There is only one scene where we get somewhat of an explanation as to why she's there at Alfea, why she came there, why now. She basically tells Tara that she came for her and her family because Flora's parents asked her to help by going there and being around, like helping them. This is a weak motivation for a whole ass main cast character. She is here to support Tara. Supporting someone else does not equate to a compelling character-driven story, and you really need that to introduce a new character who's supposed to be one of the main girls. There's just issues in terms of logic here too. What parents would send their daughter, who's only 16 or 17, whatever age she is, she's definitely under 18, to take care of a whole ass family unit at a time when the school was just attacked by the burned ones and is under the control of a weird principle. If this issue doesn't bother you, the fact that this is not a strong motivation for a character should. I always said that Bloom is like a very difficult character to like, and every character in this damn show is not particularly likable. Flora is definitely a contender to knock Bloom off of the #1 spot of the most annoying character imaginable, or the most unlikable character imaginable from the main cast of the good guys. This girl, listen, I like that she's portrayed to be a free spirit. I like that part. I think that this type of personality is missing from the main cast. I do like that she's the one to encourage Aisha to experience love and other emotions. However, the way that she does it, genuinely the worst way to execute it imaginable. The writers try to show Flora and Aisha bonding over talking about Gray, Aisha's love interest, with Flora starting a whole speech about love and how Aisha should lose control because it is the best part. And she does that while her and Aisha are sneaking into Rosalind's lab, where they think she tortured a fairy they saw die an episode ago. The reason why they're there is to get evidence that Rosalind had a scraper in there and that she was doing some testing and that it was unethical. And they can only do it at that moment in particular because there's a lot of people at the banquet and not that many people are gonna be down in that area. And Flora, a newbie that we don't know much about, it is her second episode in the show, stops Aisha and gives her a speech about a guy that Aisha barely fucking knows. Seriously? Right now? She doesn't even just talk. She stops Aisha every 2 steps as well.
So I'm not trying. No, we're not doing this again. Get that.
What the?
At this point, Flora already went behind Tara's back and injected the patient in their lab that was dangerous to administer. And in that instance, she still thinks that she killed that guy, or at the very least contributed to his death. That's just too much of a major fuck up for a character that is not only new to us, the audience, but to almost everyone in the show as well. A character that does not seem to have a reason for anything she does. She wanted to help, and that's it. Why the rush? Why not help Tara check her work? Why sneak around? Her not having a different motivation aside of trying to help out really doesn't help her character with the likability points. So far, she's shown to be extremely arrogant and obsessed with romance, which does not bode well for a character who's not funny or charismatic, or some villain type that still would have to have a motivation for them to be likable. She ends her inappropriately timed and selfish tirade when they are sneaking around for clues with Aisha with this.
We are designed to fall in love.
We are designed to fall in love.
Our bodies release hormones when our gut bacteria is compatible, and yet we still resist. Why?
One more step to the right and Girlie's gonna start saying some shit about looking fertile wombs. Why not at least say we were born to love, not fall in love? No, we have to make it all about hormones and physical attraction. Some people just don't have physical attraction. What are they, not people anymore? Do they not live their lives to the fullest? Like, get a grip. And why is she so selfish to start talking about what she finds interesting or important to talk in that moment in the middle of a very important task? No thoughts, just pollination in that girl's head. Later we get a fight between Flora and Tara because Tara doesn't like Flora approaching Riven or being into him in some shape or form because Tara thinks that he's a jerk and she's trying to let Flora know about it and kind of keep her away from cahooting with him. And Flora tells Tara that Tara is jealous. Let me remind you that this happened after Flora killed someone. She thought she killed someone. And then she finds out that, oh, he didn't die. But technically, she still did something very reckless and irresponsible. And she still decides to talk to Tara like this, as if there's no evidence to support the fact that she does not think before she acts. I did like that Flora said to Tara that she's gonna keep her secret about her coming out for as long as needed. And that it's Tara's choice to, come out whenever she wants to, whatever. But then, don't worry. The story bounces back to having Flora be selfish, obsessed with romance, and having terrible timing when Bloom is literally at her tribunal, being on trial for murder of Rosalind in front of the Queen, relying on Tara and Flora to find a crucial piece of evidence, Farrah's body, to save Bloom from a very harsh sentence. And she decides to talk to Tara about whether Tara's crush likes her. Once again, now? Do you care about anything? Anything else but pollination? This is just so ridiculous. I had to take a breather when I was watching this because what shit friends. Just wow. Speaking of shit friends, number 5. There's virtually no good friends on this show. A show that was promoted as about friendship at its core. It's so weird watching this show. In season 1, we jump from them being literal bitches to each other.
And it's very you. Sorry, not that I really know you. If I take it, will you stop talking?
For no reason, by the way, to them calling each other friends out of nowhere. There are so many conflicts set up between characters. Aisha and Tara, not so much. More of the other girls treating them badly. And none of these conflicts get resolved by the time they start calling each other friends in a very performative way. There is this scene I wanted to bring up as an example of good bonding in the show, and that is the scene between Bloom and Sky in season 2 when they go to Sky's house and they ride the horses. It's a very sweet scene, a scene where they're genuinely just enjoying each other's company. It's a great scene. I wish we had more of those scenes in season 1 where we actually were establishing their dynamics and their friendships. It would make a lot more sense why they even care for each other, why they want to help each other in very dire situations. If you would have set up their friendships and their love interests in a more of a interesting and genuine kind of way as the scene between Bloom and Sky, I think that a lot more people would give a fuck about what happens to these characters in general. When Stella is taken away from Althea by her mother, we are supposed to feel this void in the suite. Tara, as she always does, has lines and actions written in that are supposed to lead us, the audience, to feel like they have somehow become unlikely friends and that they miss the snarky Stella. And honestly, setups like this, they can work sometimes, but they would have to be formatted entirely differently. If you wonder what I mean about formatting it differently, it is time for irreversible changes to young adult shows because of streaming. Since we arrived at the age of streaming services, a new model of releasing shows has appeared. Season drops. Basically, shows have become a format that is oftentimes not consumed by 1-hour episodes every week, with the hiatus thrown in here and there, but as a one-day release of an entire show available to stream for everyone at any speed they choose to do so. Binging. Over time, streaming services like Netflix started to produce a lot of shows, with many of them being greenlit for season 1, and with that, a lot of shows started to cut the fat, since streaming makes their money differently. And binging is a form of media consumption that is unforgiving of filler. A red herring? Not in this day and age, babe. A random pairing of characters flirting to see if the audience reacts positively? Not on this audience's watch, bitch. You heard that? Or it's just Marlene and Julie gasping in the background. So in this case, you cannot make teen shows the way they were always made. You used to get 24 episodes a season, with time between one half of the season and another, with room to twist and turn and write a quick little enemies to lovers storyline, when a really huge portion of your audience suddenly becomes obsessed with one of the main characters dating a creep that killed their friend and their friend's mother and her uncle, maybe set the hospital on fire, but in a hot way. In the case of Fate, we get a showrunner that is used to producing shows that use the old structure and were produced without a clear goal in mind in terms of where the story is going to end. Brian said he likes it loosey-goosey, looking at what audience likes, cutting things here and there. When asked, and I quote, "Does that mean you have a 5-year idea? What is your dream if you're able to do this?" Brian said, "If the show were to continue on, us feeling like, how can we evolve this story in a new way? How can we start telling it in a different way so that we give additional life to the story, but still feeling like there is a beginning and middle and end to the story that we started telling in season 1, and we will finish telling when season whatever happens." This answer is straight out of the previous 24 episodes a season world of teen drama writing. And you just cannot do that with a show that has only 6 to 7 episodes a season and disappears for 2 years in between seasons. The reason why some shows get away with 6 to 7 episodes is because they're written as a complete story with a predetermined end. To be fair, the genre that Fate is in does not work well in the streaming era with a short number of episodes, because most shows within the YA drama world are heavily relying on familiarity. If you watch The Vampire Diaries right now, just binge it, the only reason why you would feel like the characters have even a semblance of a bond is the sheer amount of hours of those characters being around each other without any real well thought out writing having to build those relationships up limb by limb. A show like Pretty Little Liars could have been a really tightly packed show without any filler if it was shortened, and it would have done well in streaming, but the product that we have today has a cult following because of its nonsense too.
I would have done anything for Charlotte.
You proved that when you married her cousin.
Nonsense with enough reasons surrounding it to still make some sort of sense. You just have to know what you're offering. If it is not a predetermined story and you don't particularly like the original, based on what has been said by Brian and the cast, we can assume that you have to secure a weekly release of a long-ass, nonsense-filled show. Then again, it wouldn't do that well on streaming services. What I'm saying is, it is practically impossible to get people invested in characters in the same way, since they don't have them in their lives for a long time. You don't watch a Halloween episode of a new teen show around Halloween time. You don't get a Thanksgiving or a Christmas episode that correlates with Thanksgiving and Christmas happening in your personal life. The characters don't graduate or have homecoming parties at the same time as you do. In Fate's case, it seems like the characters don't even think about universities. Maybe they don't have them in that world. They don't really go without sleeping because of finals. They don't have stupid subplots to show off their relationships with side characters. No money problems, which is the biggest unrealistic part, because that's a really big part of anyone's life, how they're going to finance their education and all of that kind of shit. So you have to make your story good because there's no familiarity to speak of. You have to make it interesting to watch and rewatch if you want to stay in people's minds for the 2 years that you're absent. Having 6 episodes of really tightly packed storytelling is not the same as 24 episodes, so it can't be treated the same way. The Vampire Diaries tricks, they just don't work here. It's basically a different format. And the only reason why the Vampire Diaries survived for as long as they did was familiarity, the vampire craze, and, to be honest, lack of other options. To compare to nowadays, the teen drama show landscape is very different now. You have to keep up because you can't win anybody over by volume anymore. So you gotta do it with quality. Or, exceptional marketing. So you're back, huh? Stella comes back. When they're deciding whether they should help Bloom, Stella calls Bloom our friend, and genuinely I was so confused. Like, did I miss an episode? I looked at my notes. No. Stella did not have a bonding moment with Bloom, nor with Tara, or Musa, or Aisha. So what the hell is going on, babes? How did we get here? You can't just write sloppy dialogue or scenes that jump cut your story to where you want it to be if you didn't actually lay the foundation down. The only friendship moment that does not read as fake is the one scene where the girls are at Bloom's house at the very end. The only reason this scene works is because there's music playing, we don't hear them say anything, and no one is trying to oversell their connection to us. In season 2, we start with Tara, our local friendship marketing manager, drawing attention to how nice it is that they are all together right now And honestly, this is their only weapon to get the audience on board of this unfounded friendship goals boat, because it is not narratively earned. With Flora added to the cast in season 2, they kind of had to do the same type of thing and just say that she's close with people without really showing, except of course the clumsy attempt at making her besties with Aisha. They could have actually tied Flora to the cast and to the story really easily, considering that Tara and Sam have grown up in Althea. They could have just written in some dormant conflict that Flora has had with people at Althea, with some people who might have been also kids of the people who teach there or whatever it is. Or even Sky, Riven. They were there last year. Another friendship that was interesting but mishandled was Stella and Beatrix. Maybe mishandled is not the right word because maybe it was intentional, but this friendship shows just how much of a dickhead every single one of the Winx Suite girls is. Beatrix is quite an interesting character. Morally gray, technically in a position that would explain a lot of why she would need to commit acts that would ruin her relationships with people in the show. She led scrapers in Althea and Sebastian with them, of course, in season 2, which is a shitty thing to do, but she does it in exchange for some information about her biological family, more specifically her 2 sisters. Sebastian has that info, okay? So it's an exchange. Later, Beatrix comes to Stella to explain the situation and to explain Sebastian's plan to her so she is aware of what's going on, and Stella is obviously upset with her. She can be upset, and rightfully so, but it is so infuriating what she says to Beatrix when Beatrix tells her that she has no one left anymore because her adoptive dad, Andreas, has died. Stella says this dramatic line,
I have no one. You had me.
"You had me." Bullshit. You wouldn't talk to Beatrix unless it was in secret. And considering how much time Stella was spending with others at school, it was probably like almost never. Beatrix is going through losing her only parent, an orphan now, with nowhere to go, no home or anything, and Stella has the audacity to say that she was always there for her, that Beatrix had her. No, she didn't. Do you not feel ashamed? In this case, it would be okay if Stella was pissed. That's understandable. But at least it would have looked like she cared and that she was self-aware enough if she knew that Beatrix is basically homeless and an orphan with no friends or support system. So she would understand that she might do something stupid or something inconsiderate or selfish in order to survive in some kind of capacity. They had like an interesting dynamic going, but this last part really paints Stella to be worse than a friend that just didn't know how to reconcile a group of her friends with someone who's on the outside who was kind of their adversary before. A better line that would imply that Stella cared about her would be something along the lines of, "I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you in the way that you needed me to. Maybe we wouldn't have ended up here." Just don't be a fake ass bitch, Stella. Come on now. The cheesy moments thrown in at the end with all the Flora and Tara speeches about friendship, how Althea is their home, and that's why Flora is gonna sacrifice herself because it's her home too. It's just so silly. They could have at least kept it consistent by making Flora say something along the lines of, "Oh, I'm doing this because I'm here to help my family out. I said that I'm gonna help you guys out, and this is what I'm doing." Instead of this new nonsense about how this is her new home now too. Like, come on now. It's just not supported by any actual bonds between anybody. It's ridiculous. With Tara's insistence on going into Althea and not being sitting ducks, we get a good delivery from the actress Elliot. I believe her. She's doing a great job at that, especially by referencing Flora sacrificing herself, but it gets spoiled right after. They are about to go into battle, and instead of a moment that might be a little bit more straightforward, with her confessing her feelings to her crush because she doesn't know what's gonna happen next, and getting back to what she was just making a scene about like a second ago, we get this dialogue that literally references TED Talks that Tara watched about empowerment.
And they need us. Not gonna wait outside my home for somebody else to save it.
Yeah, you're right.
Hi. Well, I saw this really great TED Talk the other day about empowerment.
I get that they're trying to show that she is nervous because she's talking to her crush and she's like, you know, saying random things that don't really make any sense to bring up right now. But it just reads really off in that moment because a few of her friends are already in grave danger and her cousin is about to die sacrificing herself for their sake. So it would just be a lot cuter if she stuttered maybe a bit with a couple words and her crush kissed her right away. 2. the point, because there's no time to waste. Making her blab about TED Talks makes her sound like she already forgot that Flora is about to die. All these inappropriate and sensitive moments that make characters look selfish lead me to the next point. Number 6, lack of consistent motivations for characters and contradicting morals or logic. I put my lip gloss on, I forgot. There is a big difference between morally gray characters who had motivations that were perceived to be entirely different by other characters, especially by the main characters, which would lead to a plot twist, and poorly written characters. Fate has a bunch of characters to fill these categories, and if you are looking for a show that could entertain you as more or less a grown person, I think you might gonna find it difficult. The biggest conflict in this show is between blood witches and fairies, and we go through a lot of back and forth between who are the bad guys in season 1 and season 2. In season 1 it was Rosalind versus the Althea staff members or faculty, and in season 2 it is fairies versus blood witches, or Rosalind versus Sebastian. These conflicts are connected, obviously. So the center conflict is fairies versus blood witches, technically speaking. Fate tries to create a complicated narrative with a lot of gray areas and nothing being as it seems. And unfortunately, building a narrative like that over multiple seasons does not work very well if you don't know how long your story is going to be. With Brian at the helm of this show, we get a production that will come up with something, anything, as long as there is demand for it. If you want to have a vague political system with vague political conflicts that are malleable and can be stretched or condensed if needed, you kind of have to understand that it is very unlikely that you're going to get a complex story with big conflicts on the grand scale. For shows that have no set story, you kind of have to stick to the format of having the main characters as the good guys, the rest are bad, with some characters permanently crossing from one side to the other here and there. Fate is a perfect example as to why you need to decide on your story, because otherwise you kind of stuck throwing in meaningless plot twists. They can only happen if you force them into the story, not because they organically happen because of characters' bias or logical consequences. The issue with motivations, morals, and politics are the most clear in the characters and plot lines of Rosalind and Sebastian. We get a lot of plot twists, especially in season 2, where we're spun around whenever writers see fit. This is a fast timeline of who is the one stirring shit up and being the bad guy. At first it seems like it's Beatrix, she's up to no good. Then it's the Althea faculty who killed everyone in Astadel, including Bloom's and Beatrix's parents, allegedly. But wait, it was actually Rosalind who did all that, but like suddenly it's cool with everyone because those people at Astadel were blood witches. We as the audience have no reason to be cool with blood witches being massacred, but okay. Basically, Rosalind is cold-blooded, but she's like that because she wants results for the better good. Actually, wait, Rosalind kills Farah. Even though not something necessary in that moment, because Farah wouldn't stand in her way of stirring shit up with blood witches, because Farah was like super chill, so relieved when she realized that it was blood witches and not fairies that were at Astadel. She genuinely says, "Oh, so it was just blood witches." And they both go, "Oh, cool." Of course, Sol is upset that he killed Andreas for nothing, but that's a different conversation. Also, now the girly girls are thinking that Rosalind is the one stealing the magic from fairies, and that she's like being a shady little hairball, you know? Psych! Rosalind is actually looking to protect the fairies. That fairy that she experimented on, he's cool with it. Of course, it's insinuated that his mind was messed up by Rosalind. But wait, she literally tortures everyone for information. Doesn't matter whether she's in cahoots with them or not. You know, a la Darth Vader. How cute. Why, again, would anybody want to work for her or with her? Now another twist. It's actually our Sebastian's friend who is stealing fairy powers, okay? He hates Rosalind. He says it's because Rosalind is trying to instigate a war between blood witches and fairies, the same way as his father did, so he doesn't like his father either. He basically says, "I just think it's fucked up how blood witches are treated in the other world." And you know, he's got a point, since everyone almost did a jig when they realized that it was just blood witches at Astadel who they, you know, massacred. Anyway, Sebastian spills the beans to Bloom about Rosie Girl killing Farah. bam! Now we're supposed to see what was Rosalind's plan all along. With her saying this to Bloom, quote, "Two powerful fairies, an example to the other world. Everything I wanted to do together, I can do alone. If you want to change the world for the better, you need to be capable of anything." Okay. What was your goal though? Even just like the short-term one. Because having access to the dragon flame is not exactly a goal. The power is a tool. So what do you need that tool for? If there's no other reason but power here, Sebastian is right once again. Baby, can we fix it? Maybe Bloom should join him at this point? I honestly don't know. Rosalind's ass dead. Now, Sebastian wants to bring Astrodel people back from the dead, which would destabilize the other world, I guess, or destroy it, something like along those lines. It wasn't specified exactly what would happen. Let's assume that he kind of changed his plan. That originally it was what he told Bloom, which is just to have the Blood Witches left alone, no animosity. And then he saw that the Blood Witches were accused for the murder of Rosalind. And he was like, never mind, let's get the witches back from down under. Don't mean Australia, I mean the other down under. Considering that the protagonists know about this lie that Queen Luna spread to get all the Blood Witches hated by the public, it's weird how none of them are trying to figure out what is the point of Queen Luna doing this, right? Clearly he's got a point, so much so that Bloom has literally killed somebody who had opposing views to his. But then this conflict, this faux complexity that was created between the two sides just gets abandoned. It's never resolved. Obviously they are still in a power struggle with Sebastian, but they don't actually address that issue that they're fighting about. And I don't mean like, oh, this is gonna be resolved in the next season kind of unresolved. I mean they killed the guy without having that conversation at all, which is a classic for the climax of the story, to have the two sides kind of communicate about things, even if in an aggressive manner. Just why wouldn't anyone be like, okay, my dude, my main villain, let's have this, we've got different philosophies, I cannot let you destroy the other world to battle the oppressors, even if I agree with you on some things, kind of conversation. That would make this whole arc kind of worth it, you know? A battle that would show that they're not like one-dimensional characters that just believe in blindly killing people because they were told to do so. I think that would prove that this show was aiming at something more than just a preteen drama. Is that it? Oh yay! Evil is defeated or whatever. So we don't actually get to explore the positions of the two main villains in this story. How do they oppose morally to the main characters or anything like that? Which is such a shame because I actually enjoyed Sebastian. I found him quite entertaining. I loved his relaxed attitude, his casual conversations, his love for nostalgic Earth Kid shit. That was cute. And then they just kill him like this. It feels very reductive. Just no proper conflict and just have this. There's also an issue with the way that Aisha handles her conversation with Gray. The dude just wants his brother back. I don't like the way they framed it as him tired of parental pressure in regards to being a good student and being successful because he's like a replacement kid or whatever. That was weird. But he wants his brother back because the Althea faculty and Rosalind literally killed him. And Aisha is like, you tainted my first kiss. You lied to me about being a blood witch. Which, yeah, obviously he did. But why would he tell you? You guys literally have no problem genociding them. So what the hell did you expect here? I'm not just gonna come up to somebody who thinks that my kind can all die and it will be okay. Not just die, but be murdered. And be like, I am one of them, actually. Wanna date? God, come on. It sounds like she's saying, fuck your dead brother. You know, I think we weren't shown enough of the recent conflicts that happened, or relatively recent, for the audience to not find the apologists weird, you know? If the Winx Suite girls were actually protagonist-worthy characters, at least a couple of them would have a moral problem with how this whole Blood Witch situation is handled. I just feel like it's so messed up. I'm not cool with just hating Blood Witches or just rooting for the main characters for no reason, without showing, for example, them trying to fix the situation and Blood Witches rejecting their attempt at negotiations or something. Especially with the backdrop of number 7, glorification of military and empty titles. There is so much glorification of soldier shit. It's crazy. It's real bad. And you know, having military obsession with an emphasis on mindless order following does not bode well for character development if it goes unexamined and unchallenged. And it does go unexamined and unchallenged in Fate. Starting in season 1, we get a constant description of certain characters being war heroes like Sky's dad or Bloom's mom. And they do use it as like a character development moment for Sky where he doesn't like all that pressure of being a son of a war hero. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about examining the pressure of being the successor of someone successful. In season 1, episode 5, we get a whole speech about the honor in being a soldier from Seoul. Sky does address his discomfort with being a soldier, but it is again from a perspective of being uncomfortable with not knowing when you're going to die and not being able to see your loved ones, rather than from a perspective of, you know, having moral conflict regarding doing what you're told with no questions asked. This is even more evident in Sky and Soul conversation in season 2, where Soul says, "We're soldiers, we don't get to do that." So weirdly self-assured about soldiers being the only ones who live in uncertainty. And this is a sentiment that's not challenged by anybody. No one goes, "Okay, babe, nobody knows how long they'll live." And there are many other people who are not in combat who also constantly live on that edge. The writer is just so immature or maybe inexperienced. Like, how do you seriously write that and make it an ideology that's just accepted there? It's such a surface level view on life and its unfortunate complexity and cruelty that I was flabbergasted by this shit while watching it slip out of this character's mouths. If you're gonna be watching or rewatching this show, take a shot every time someone glorifies a war hero or criminal or disregards human life on very shaky evidence, like with blood wedges, and I guarantee you'll be wasted. Number 8. Weird blocking choices when it comes to discovering bodies and Musa's powers involvement in that. I didn't know if I should put it in art direction, writing, or world building, so I just decided to talk about it here. This show is so uniquely unaware how the camera angles in combination with weird writing can lead to nonsensical scenes. We get not 1, not 2, but at least 3 scenes where characters are wildly unaware of their surroundings in a way that's so painfully unbelievable. First, we get Riven going through the barrier in season 1 to go for a smoke. He walks in the direction of the man that got killed by a burned one in the beginning of the episode. He is quite literally facing the body while he's walking to a spot where he was going to sit down. He then sits down to smoke while looking around, including looking directly to the right where the body is. The spot that is right in front of him, the view unobstructed. And they proceed to frame him as an unassuming little Riven boy who's just sitting there, who did not notice the bloody body there. Why didn't they block the scene better? Film the scene with Riven entirely facing away from the body, for example. Have a twig snap, the classic, so he turns around to look, I don't know, get up, maybe move a few steps. It's just so weird because it doesn't make sense spatially. Like, if you construct the scene in your mind, it doesn't make sense. Just placing the camera in a different direction would have fixed this issue and have him approach from a different angle. We get the same stupid ass situation in the last battle with Sebastian, where Stella, Aisha, and Tara enter a room with both Sky and Beatrix visibly on the floor, with Beatrix literally lying in a pool of her own blood, and none of them notice Beatrix until Sebastian quite literally tells them about her being dead. Right over there, Stella is literally facing Beatrix in the formation that they put them in.
Hope you guys are great. I'm in... I don't know what the fuck just happened.
There's nothing in the room. The room is empty. Nothing is obstructing the view, babe. What's going on? But the most ridiculous example of this spatial conundrum is Musa and Tara walking in the woods in season 1, episode 2, where the girls are looking for Stella's ring that the burned one has, and Musa stops because she feels sudden pain. Dude, when I tell you this scene is funny as hell, I mean it. It's supposed to be dramatic, sad, and scary, but it becomes comical because Miusa realizes that there are dead and injured people everywhere, literally right there, because of her special empath power. Bitch, just look up. You don't have to be an empath for that. I would understand if she like felt pain and was like, oh my god, I know what happened, or I know something bad happened. Let me focus and lead you to the people who are suffering right now. But Musa and Terra literally stop because Musa is in pain and they look up to a sea of bodies. Come on now. Also, the word empath gives me the heebie-jeebies, and we all know why. Number 9, the threesome and Riven being edgy.
Every movie needs a horny weasel.
Riven, I don't think he's a bad character, but I think some of the lines in the show can come off as forced edginess. Riven, Dane, and Beatrix are a throuple in season 1, and it's a bit messy because there's no build-up for Dane and Beatrix, while Dane basically says that Beatrix is the only one who accepted him as who he is. And it's just so out of left field because the only scenes that we saw of him being very much accepted was with Terra, so their relationship reads a little bit as an attempt at being edgy because of how little real connection we really see between the characters. Riven and Dane get some scenes like that. Riven and Beatrix get some scenes like that, but not Dane and Beatrix. So it really felt like their relationship was being used to be edgy. I don't hate the dynamic, but I do find it questionable in terms of scenes that we actually get to see in the show. 10! Ding ding ding! Forced and inaccurately used woke terminology. This is so prevalent in shows nowadays. I don't know why I'm even surprised at this point. We literally start the show with Bloom telling Sky that he's mansplaining things to her because he told her where the fairy and the specialist buildings are on her first day when she was clearly lost. Sky is definitely being too much at that moment, especially with how they blocked the scene with him stopping a conversation with a guy in a very hasty way to launch himself at Bloom and start speaking at her. I think Bloom was warranted in her slight standoffishness, but mansplaining? That's not what the term means. We have to reserve these terms for when they are needed. Otherwise, they become a little bit too easy to dismiss when they need their full impact in the right moments. We get another jam later in a flashback sequence with Bloom's parents.
Don't you try to feminist me, sweetie. This basic bitch will break out her bullhorn on her dissertation and take your ass to school.
Huh? Excuse me? If she genuinely knew what the hell she was talking about when it comes to feminism, she wouldn't start talking about it here. Because even though Bloom brought up her identity as a teen daughter and mentioned that they're taking away her agency, it does not mean that it's a conversation about feminism. Like, this is so ridiculous that I genuinely don't even understand why she brought it up. Is this good parenting? No, but the writing still needs to make sense, even if she has poor parenting skills. It's literally 2 damn situations in 1 episode. We get another moment that kind of stuck out to me as a sore thumb in episode 4 when Dane comes to talk to Terra after he said a bunch of nasty shit about her on Instagram stories with Beatrix and Riven when they were canoodling. Terra's dad and her brother kind of get up from their seats, thinking that maybe they should tell him to just leave. But Terra says, whilst I appreciate that it is a historical perspective of the patriarchy to save women from upsetting situations, I've got this. Girl, you could have just said, nah, I got this. Like, if they would have said, no, we think you shouldn't talk to him, we should deal with this, and especially if they would have added something about being men, I would totally get this reaction. Like, yeah, thanks, but you guys are being weird and sexist right now, you know? But in this case, girl, just say you got it. That's it. When it comes to all of these kinds of things, what people would call wokeness, I am glad that they have fixed the issue with heteronormativity being to the max. The original is really pushing it. I already talked about it in my deep dive into that show, but it is a good thing that they fixed that. Number 11. Tone issues. This one is a quick one. It kind of relates to point 6. I have explained a few scenes that kind of piss me off because of the characters switching emotionally in the middle of something super important in order to talk to or about their crush and kind of having this weird levity out of nowhere. But I think the most glaring example of that kind of gave me whiplash was the scene after Bloom left to the realm of darkness. At first everyone reads the letters she left for them, they hug, but then immediately we get a montage of what happens right after, and it's so weird. Because we know it hasn't been that long for sure, because Beatrix's grave is still fresh. So it really couldn't have been that long since Bloom left. Maybe a week max. And everyone is cheery and smiley. It's kind of like an end to a season where everything worked out the way that the characters hoped. It looks as if they got rid of the big bad, and the big bad is Bloom. I might agree with that because I don't like the character, but they shouldn't be thinking that or acting like this. This genuinely reminds me of the later seasons, so 5 and up, of the Nickelodeon being involved in the cartoon, where the girls just do not care what just happened. They don't care if one of their friends is missing. They don't care if they are in a very dire situation, if they are gonna have an inappropriately timed party for the sake of having toddlers interested in whatever is going on the screen. They will. This feels the same way. So weird, man. Lightning round. Got another 11 points that are gonna be in lightning round real quick, so keep up. Rosalind killed a rat, that's why I call her a rat killer, and that's why I want to fight her. Why didn't Musa talk to Sam about his anger a bit earlier? Even if she did take away his anger a couple of times and she didn't realize that it wasn't working very well yet, why not bring it up anyway, because she keeps on feeling him being angry? It's really not emotionally intelligent for somebody who's supposed to be emotion-related fairy. Why did Andreas act like a dick to Sky, considering that he's the one who abandoned him and lied to him? And the worst part is that he knows how to be fatherly. He is a pretty good father to Beatrix. So what the hell is the issue? What was the point of Tara's dad ratting out Soul to Rosalind when he came to see Sky? He didn't have to say anything. Just pretend nothing's going on, girl. Claim ignorance. If you think that Rosalind took this information out of his mind on her own, I call bullshit, to be honest, yeah. Because she couldn't have known that she would have to go through his mind and like rummage through and find out information on that day in particular. In season 2, episode 3, at 16 minutes 25 seconds, Musa is on Sam's bed waiting for him in her boots. Boots she wears outside on the bed, on the sheets, bitch. Oh my god. Take the shoes off. I swear to god. Take the shoes off when you're inside. What is this? Why is the only proper, not horny weasel sex scene is a teary-eyed scene at what Sky called a shrine to his dad? We wanted an adult show that could actually be sexy, flirty, and frisky. And we got teary, dad shrine, and too risky. Oh, that kind of rhymed. Rosalind saying status and money while complaining about having to get along with people at the alumni party is really funny. Like, bitch, do you think you're some hippie artist that is looking for a chill, polyamorous commune? She wants to reign the other world, and she's giving this stupid ass speech. I swear to god, it's so funny. When Flora and Aisha find Rosalind's lab, it's so ridiculous that she literally sterilized the entire space, but left the scraper to just roam around the lab and potentially the school. She's really good at keeping kids safe. It would be a lot better if the characters started as 18-year-olds than 16-year-olds. It makes sense that Musa doesn't want her powers, and I think it's a good storyline, but giving her powers away to a scraper that will give it to Sebastian is kind of selfish, since we were told that Musa is one of the most powerful mind fairies, which is, again, debatable. She could have asked for those power suppressing things right away instead of this. Speaking of Musa's powers, how is Raven a fucking mind fairy? I mean, not literally, but almost. He's the only one who's getting a clue quickly enough. He's the only one who sees that she doesn't want her powers back, to compare to all of her other friends who are around her a lot more. It's a little funny, but good for him. That's it. That's enough of talking about writing in the show. I'm so tired. Holy shit. Did you guys feel the same about any of these moments? Let me know, and we will move on to the world building in Fate. Is one of the issues that's the most important, since it is a fantasy show that is made for people who are older than 14 years old. God, the chewing. My dog is eating your treat. Anyway, there are a lot of things that just don't quite make sense. Let's start with the basics though. Number 1, the magic system. The magic system is very important for fantasy shows. Without referencing the specifics of the original show, Fate presents us with fairies that use, you guessed it, elemental magic. Listen, if you're gonna throw away one of the most important parts parts of the original, or one of the most interesting parts of the original, and replace it with another magic system, I definitely expect that you're gonna come up with something good. And unfortunately, elemental magic makes me want to stop watching any type of piece of media that I am engaging with. Let me specify, any work that's been created after year 2010. I'm sure that for anyone older than me, the year might change, but many of us are tired of magic that's relying on elements of nature. It can be done well if it's developed enough. I do want to expand on this point by saying that there are a few things that Fate implemented that made the system a lot better. One of the positives is the fact that they added mind and light fairies to the mix. It's not just the 4 basic elements, as well as they specified that when a fairy masters the element that they're born with, they can learn to channel other elements. Of course, this can cause some issues with characters being overpowered, like for example Bloom, considering that she's very powerful, it would open up doors to her being overpowered. But she already is overpowered even without this little loophole. So another thing that really disappointed me when it comes to the magic system in Fate is, of course, the fact that the magic is generated by emotions. Listen, I think that any magic system, emotions will influence performance, just like with any other skill. If you just witness something traumatic, you might have a hard time passing the driving test right after. But every magic system that makes emotions of the magic user the source of its power is quite lazy in concept. You gotta agree with that much. Not only is it lazy, but it also makes a huge chunk of the show way too simplistic and impossible to ground in any sort of logic. And I really can't give them a break on this one because it is fundamental to the functioning of the world that they're building. Right away, this lore makes magic a little bit boring, especially for their target audience that's capable of following a complex skill and value system. How do you explain that their mentors are a lot more advanced in magic than the students are? You're conflating skill with emotional intelligence, therefore making the adult characters in the show difficult to make human, while at the same time powerful. Yeah, I like Farah Dowling, but it makes no sense that she's more powerful if the source of magic is emotion. Why are classes for magic or not just individual therapy sessions? This is the issue that this power system carries to any and all media that uses it. It's not quantifiable enough, and it is usually something that's way too directly related to the character itself and their development, making their life problems and their magic problems Venn diagram a damn circle. They should cross in a well-developed magic world, but if you want to have an immersive, interesting world to write your characters in, they should never occupy the exact same space. Many people have pointed out Bloom's notes on magic in season 1, making fun of how juvenile it is, and how none of them should really need notes to remember emotion equals powers and love, fear, hatred. This problem continues though, even though this note thing is called out by Stella. To be honest, there's nothing much that they're offering. We get 2 coaching or training class scenes. One of them is with Farah, and the other one is with Rosalind. Farah's class at least feels a little bit like more of real coaching that is more specific in terms of telling the girls what they are lacking in their magic practice, but technically speaking, she does not say anything quantifiable either. She told Aisha to separate a drop of water from a bigger ball of water and have control of it, but like how? How do you do that? This is the most complex scene when it comes to conversations about magic and using it, and yet there's nothing to pull from it. The actress is playing Farah is doing a really fantastic job though. She really gives you that feeling that there is some sort of wisdom, or rather technique, that's being shared until you really listen. Season 2 gives us coaching with Rosalind, but all we get is, let's go, use your instinct in combat. Your emotions are a tool. They are your power source. Use them. This is literally what we open season 2 with, and it's just not good enough. One of the most important pillars of fantasy shows is magic lore, and it has to be more complex than this. They could have even just implied that there are different techniques to getting better at magic without writing themselves into a corner with the whole powers equals emotions thing. You think Bloom's notes were funny in season 1? The show doesn't offer any more than that. They actually make it a little bit more ridiculous by forgetting their own lore, which is literally powers equals emotions, if you've forgotten. They go back and forth between don't let emotions cloud your judgment That's a literal quote, by the way. And let go to emotions. So which one is it? Which one? For the love of God, why is this so shallow and boring? Come on, you guys. One of the good things about the magic system that they have come up with is what kind of powers they came up with for air and light fairies. Air includes speed, temperature, sound, electricity. It's genuinely so versatile. Beatrix literally disintegrates that dude from season 1, down to his molecules. Air is actually an element that's so much cooler than Bloom's dragon flame in this show. I think mostly because fire is just fire. She doesn't really get much else that she can do with it. Light magic is also very interesting in the show, including more than just illumination of spaces or attacks with light. Light fairies can create massive illusions to either construct a new reality or to cloak something, like Queen Luna masking the village of Asterdale. They can also become invisible themselves, create astral projections, and manipulate darkness. Since we're on a topic of specific powers, let's talk about number 2, Musa's powers. Musa is a mind fairy. Mind fairies in this world are also called empaths. I have talked about this in the writing section and I have made fun of it already, but this name really haunts me nowadays. All the aggravating, insensitive videos on TikTok of people crying when they see an old person enjoy a meal on their own. Like, that's so annoying. I love eating alone, and it would be such an annoying experience if someone was sitting at another table just looking at me and crying. Like, bitch, eat your damn meal. Those empaths really need to get a goddamn grip. Anyway, mind fairies can feel what other people are feeling. They have power over those feelings and can alter people's memories. Listen, when I heard about Musa's powers, I was a little bit annoyed, and yeah, it was because of the name, but also because so many scenes show how useless those powers are and how weird the approach of writers is to this power. It's always Musa using her powers to just empathize like a regular human being. It's really worrisome that the creators of this show think that being able to see that someone else is projecting or overcompensating or are in pain is a magical ability. Yeah, the most interesting thing they could do is just have Musa really hate her powers because they're just so lame. It's also a little bit confusing how she's even considered to be one of the most powerful fairies at Althea if she can't even guard her own mind from her own powers. Oh, this one. Number 3, geography and politics of the world. Buckle in, everyone, okay? In episode 1, almost immediately, we get a globe of the other world in Miss Dowling's office, which is very handy for our purposes. And this globe shows us Solaria, with Althea situated in Solaria right here, inside of its borders. We also see Heraklion right over here, Heraklion Sea, and we also know that there is Linfea there. But this is where it's getting dicey, okay? It seems like the creators of Fate did not decide on where things are, because the globe in Dowling's office and the official infographics that they posted on their Instagram don't match at all. Like, I'm not even picky about things like this, but this is a ridiculous level of not giving a shit, okay? So on this map, Heraklion is on the same continent as Solaria. You can go back and look at the globe again. And Linfea is where Heraklion is supposed to be. Althea is also right in the middle of Solaria instead of closer to the border, but it's not even that big of a deal considering that Heraklion is on the same goddamn continent all of a sudden. It's not a separate continent anymore. Why is it so off? I understand if they were like, pointing at the map like they do with Althea on this map and it's not exactly in the same spot or whatever. Who cares? But this is big things, okay? Maybe draw a little map for yourself, or where are the countries? Where are the realms? Which continents they occupy? This is... When I was writing a fantasy book, when I was like in grade 4, I have made a map. It doesn't have to be that specific or anything. I'm not asking you to be really good at drawing maps or be very specific or something, but just have a general sense of what you're doing here. It's important when you make it... I'm here to remind you that you're making a show. I guess you're not anymore, but you were making a show for people who are older than 5 years old. Come on. I genuinely don't think that they even know themselves where the realms are supposed to be, which is it's just funny. They already shrunk the intergalactic world of Winx to just one planet Earth. It's like a parallel world.
There are 7 realms in the other world, each a different kind of glory.
I guess Stella wasn't lying here. So we get to only see Stellaria and its political structure, which is a confusing ass mess. Stellaria is a monarchy, just like the rest of the realms allegedly, and it's ruled by Queen Luna. It is the weirdest structure imaginable, not because it's a monarchy or something, but because it seems like there are basically barely anyone else involved in this structure of this massive country with no political games to speak of, because the royal court and the adjacent systems are tiny as hell, disproportionately so, to compare it to the size of the country or the realm. I understand that the production was dealing with strict COVID rules. This is not a dig at the sheer amount of people in this shot, to be honest. This is more of a dig at the structural issues that make Stellaria look like a tiny world. Not even a world, a building maybe. Feels smaller than even the Harry Potter world, and Harry Potter was largely concentrated in the UK, which is a very small country, and it was also occupying a very small portion of it, being cloaked from muggles. So it's insane that it feels smaller than that. For example, Queen Luna comes to Althea to make her ruling regarding Bloom killing Rosalind, which makes so little sense since it's a college, not a court or any other government related building. Queen Luna is like the only person in the room who has any say in the whole matter, which is also strange considering not only the caliber of the murder, but also the fact that Bloom is kind of a person of interest for everyone in the other world, so no one's just gonna let Luna do whatever the hell she wants to do with her. It feels so unofficial, as if it's a conversation with a principal about tardiness. The aesthetics of Solarians that we do see doesn't really help with it either, because the outfits, the cars, the uniforms, they don't make you feel like Solaria is a superpower the way that the writers were trying to portray it. And considering Bloom's power and how important it is for all of their wars, it seems entirely unrealistic that she could just disappear in Solaria when she was put in suspension without anyone weighing in on it. It also makes zero sense that Queen Luna blamed blood witches for the murder of Rosalind, because based on the entirety of the conflict structure, she does not have any interest in doing so. She's not winning anything. She literally gains nothing by doing that, since Rosalind is the one who was obsessed with instigating shit with the blood witches. At least that's what we were supposed to believe. If they want this issue to be bigger than Rosalind, they should have written in more political interest or gain from defeating blood witches, because at this point it just seems like she closed all the doors for negotiations with them or any de-escalations. And also they would need like a very small amount of people to actually take out blood witches, considering that all of them could fit into Althea or into that mansion that they were staying in. It's also extremely confusing why Farah, Sol, Rosalind ever needed to be worried about Solarian troops being pulled from protecting Althea or tracking down the burned ones. Because Althea is in Solaria. This actually bothered me so fucking much. It is a college, not a sovereign country. Who the hell came up with this pseudo-political conflict between Queen Luna and Farah about the burned ones and needing troops? There's no political border there. And Althea is even more protected than the rest of this Solaria, all the other civilians, because they have a barrier, a magic barrier. What, Queen Luna needs to be convinced to use the army to do anything in the interest of the realm that she's in charge of? Like, that makes no sense. Althea is in Solaria, people. Like, you drew it yourself, you drew the maps yourself, you made the goddamn globe. And in both, even though they are very different, Althea was inside of Solaria. Althea is also supposed to be a very prestigious school, by the way. I wonder how anyone gets picked to be admitted to this college. What, they hold a contest as to who can get the most emotional? All of these decisions just make the other world feel ant-sized. I was thinking about why the other world feels even smaller than the Harry Potter world, and I realized that it's because of culture. The other world lacks any unique culture. Even in the kids' cartoon, in Winx, in the first season, the original season, people, I swear to God, if I see somebody thinking that Nickelodeon seasons are originals, we got the Day of the Rose, and we got hoverbike races. And I think that to establish a world for an adult audience, you have to create cultures within your realms. Stellaria cannot be exactly the same as America, Britain, or the rest of the unseen realms. Based on Sky being from Heraklion and being the same, we can assume all realms are like this. Like that fairy party in season 2 with that fairy who gets tortured, hooking up with somebody or whatever. It looked like a scene taken out of the Vampire Diaries. And the Vampire Diaries is a show that's supposed to portray a small town in Virginia, USA. Ugh, whatever. Number 4, pop culture and knowledge. Since we're on the topic of America, it reminded me, why do people in the other world know where America is? And even more so, where California is? Stella literally tells Bloom in the first episode, like second scene.
How very American of you.
It would be one thing if she knew that they existed, it's a big country in the first world, whatever. But knowing what's American of her and what isn't, it's just comical. Bloom was talking to Sky, and when he asked where she's from, she literally said California, not the United States, not the first world. By the way, why do people in other world call it first world? No, she had to say the state. Like, why would it literally mean anything to Sky? It would be even funnier if she said a city in California or a fucking neighborhood. Like, bitch, I don't know where the fuck that is. That's what the other world people should be saying. But no, as I've said before, we get references to Harry Potter, Netflix, Instagram, some beauty brands like Huda. Just, has anyone on the writing staff been a foreigner before? Do they know about some things being popular in one country and being literally unheard of in another? That's kind of what makes this bonding between characters from different worlds and different realms fun too. They introduce different types of things to each other, and holidays and cultural quirks are what makes the fantasy world come alive. Number 5, the burned ones. The burned ones are basically like fire zombies made from soldiers from an ancient war. These guys are just like vicious creatures that are hard to kill. Unless you're a protagonist, then it's literally nothing.
Because none of you have this.
So, they were roaming around the other world for 1,000 years until the Astrodel situation, where Bloom was taken to Earth and Rosalind killed a bunch of blood witches with a bunch of burned ones. Weird that they would disappear for 16 years while Bloom was on Earth. Since they can get to Earth, we have seen it happen in like episode 1 or episode 2 of season 1. And since they were also running around the other world while Bloom was in suspension as a baby, right? Why did they disappear and then reappear? But then after Bloom killed just a few of them, they stopped attacking her or following her. Even though they're technically still out there, they're not extinct. They're definitely out there. It's mentioned in season 2. It's just interesting because they get dropped in season 2 in terms of them ever showing up anywhere. But technically they're out there. And then why some of them followed Bloom and some of them don't anymore? Why did they disappear and then reappear? There's no logic to any of this. You guys, I've tried to make sense of this and it just doesn't quite work. Even if you come up with an explanation, you're gonna be pulling it out of your ass. It's not something that was explained in the show or something that was intentional. I like wrote a whole paragraph comparing things and going into details, but it's basically the same type of thing. Just me going, wait, that doesn't make sense. But why are they here? But why did they show up there? Why did they disappear? It's just the same shit over and over again. Number 6. Sexuality. I was going to add this tangent to the culture part, but it didn't quite fit, so I'm putting it here. I've said this before in my season 2 fashion review of Fate, that I don't quite get why being gay is such a big deal in the Fate world. Like, it's not Earth. Does homophobia have to exist in the other world too? Why can't we just have a universe where it's just like a thing? Just like being straight is a thing. It's so weird seeing a coming out scene in the show with fairies and magic and all that kind of stuff and then being in a parallel world. Like, why can't we have a world where no one assumes their sexuality at all? That would make Otherworld already a little bit more unique, culturally speaking. I just feel like gay stories can be just stories of people who do things and they have their own thing going on and then they are gay on the side, like everybody else is something on the side. I don't know, it's just a little bit annoying when even fantasy stories are filled with worlds that are kind of low-key homophobic because you have to come out about your sexuality, like whatever. Number 7. How are blood witches different from regular fairies? We were told that blood witches needed fairy magic to have magic, but then we find out that they actually control blood and bones, so they can do that without having fairy magic in their system. It was also explained that they draw their magic from human sacrifice, but based on what Gray feels regarding the conflict and what is brought up, it seems that it might not be the case at all. If this was the center of the conflict, human sacrifice to get magic, then it seems extremely strange of Bloom or anyone else who got to interact with the blood witches to not bring up this part in the debates, considering that this is just some information that Rosalind told Bloom without it actually resurfacing or influencing anything in interactions with Sebastian. It seems that it's not even true, and if it was supposed to be true, the writers just forgot about it when it comes to blood witches versus fairies conflict. If Sebastian and Grey didn't get their magic from sacrifice, what makes them morally bad to compare to the fairies? Especially when it comes to time before Sebastian started to attack fairies to drain their magic. Considering that Rosalind offed an entire village of blood witches, it seems like his attempt to resurrect them or kill Rosalind is more or less justifiable. And with insufficient information being given to us about the true origins of blood magic, it is really hard to root for people that just kind of don't care that they kill that many people. Like, genuinely, if it's true, if they do human sacrifice to get magic, then explain to me why it's not a bigger deal. Why it doesn't come up in conversation for Bloom, for Rosalind, Vera, anybody. Why is it not talked about? Why do they not address it ever? Number 8. This is the last point here, and it's a little bit of a nitpick, but as someone who spent the last year hooked up to an IV, I am so surprised by the way they showed injections in this show. It's honestly a little bit funny. There are 2 cases that made me giggle. Both of them were involving Flora. One of them was when she injected the fairy, and the second one is Flora injecting herself to attract scrapers to her. And in both cases, Flora takes a massive needle and just jams it in her forearm. As far as I know, you either gotta go in the vein, like an IV, or a jab that goes in the muscle. That muscle being somewhere like your thigh, upper arm, your buttocks. She just goes BAM! Into her forearm and the needle disappears. Like, babe, I know it's a prop, but we're not supposed to see that it's a prop, okay?
Flora?
That needle would literally just go through it if it actually went in that far. I don't know why, but I just couldn't keep it to myself. I had to tell you. I had to. Well, this video, it has taken me so long to make. For those of you who like this show, I hope you don't get offended by this. I am genuinely not trying to be a dick, and I'm sorry that you guys were cursed with a cliffhanger right before the show got cancelled. No one enjoys an unfinished story. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive. If you want to be along for the ride, for the updates on the progress, and some little snippets of the shows that I'm working on, you can always check the community tab, Twitter, or Instagram, and I also have behind the scenes updates on my Patreon all the time. If you like this, please leave a like, share the video with something. That's gonna really help, and I hope that this video does well because I put in a lot into these videos, and it's always nice when effort pays off. Thank you to my patrons, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!